Welcome to this eLearn Security video training lesson on Android environment configuration and virtual device management. In this video, we're going to see how to configure the Android environment on a Windows machine. We will see how to install and run tools necessary to create and run Android applications, as well as to create and run different virtual devices. During the video, we are going to be using Windows 7, but all the steps that we will see are almost the same for all operating systems. The first step when we start configuring a machine for running and writing Android applications is to download the Android SDK. Thanks to the Android SDK bundle available at this address, this is very easy. We just need to click Download the SDK button. We accept the terms and conditions and then choose our operating system version. We are using a Windows 7 64-bit machine, so we will select 64-bit and click the Download button. Since it may require some time, we have already downloaded it on our machine. We also need to be sure to have the Java Development Kit installed on the machine. We can download it at this address. Just click the latest version of the JDK and accept the license agreement. The JDK is required for the Android SDK to run. We advise that you install both 32 and 64-bit versions of the SDK. On our machine, we've already downloaded and installed both versions, so we don't need to do it right now. Now that we know what is required, let's go back to our desktop where we already have downloaded the ADB bundle. Here we have a package named ADB bundle, which contains all the software that is needed to set up our machine. In this package, we can see a folder that contains the Eclipse IDE and a folder for the Android SDK and the SDK Manager executable. All we have to do is extract its content on our machine. We've already extracted the files into our Documents folder. Here we can see the two folders, Eclipse and SDK, and the SDK Manager executable file. The first thing we have to do is run this executable. Since the Android SDK separates tools, platforms, and other components into packages, we can use the SDK Manager to download them. Here we can see, select, and install all the Android packages we want. Some of them are required and already contained in the bundle. Let's collapse all the nodes and see which packages we need to install. For our environment configuration, we need to install all the packages in the Tools folder, but we also need to select and install at least one Android version SDK. For example, we could start with the Android version 4.1.2. If we open the element, we can see that we will download few things such as the SDK platform itself, some code samples, the system images required to run emulated devices, the Google APIs, and at the end, the sources for the Android SDK. Of course, depending on the test that we want to perform, we can select and install different versions of the SDK. The last thing we have to select is the folder Extras at the bottom. In this folder, there are many packages and installers that we may need to connect actual devices, run the emulator in fast mode, and more. So now that we have selected all the packages we need, let's click on the button Install Packages. In our case, it is disabled because we have already run them. Let's select a package that we don't have in order to enable the button. Once we click Install Packages, a new window appears. To confirm the installation, we have to accept all of the licenses and click on the Install button. Note that it may require some time depending on the amount of packages selected. Right now we have all the packages installed and updated on the machine, but before seeing how to start Eclipse or create a virtual device, we need to install one of the extra tools we have downloaded. Let's go to the SDK folder, then Extra, Intel, and then Hardware Accelerated Execution Manager. This package is required if we want to run virtual devices in fast mode. So let's double-click Intel Haxum.exe and complete the installation. Since we already have it on our system, we will select Change and continue with the installation. With this package installed on the machine, we can now create and run virtual devices that will run much faster than the other. Now that everything is set, let's move back in the Eclipse folder and start it by running the executable file name eclipse.exe. If it is the first time we've run Eclipse, we will be prompted with a welcome message. Let's close this view and start using Eclipse. Here we can see different panes. We will inspect them later on. Let's first focus on the top bar. Here we can see different icons. Some of them are useful to run the application or to manage the code we write, while some others are useful to manage the Android SDK and the virtual devices. For example, this button starts the Android SDK Manager we just saw, while this runs the Android Virtual Device Manager. The AVD Manager is the main interface that allows us to create, edit, and start virtual devices. Let's start it and see how to use it. In this window, we can manage all of our virtual devices. Right now we don't have any, so let's see how to create a new one. To begin, let's click the button New and start filling in the field with the device information. In the first field, let's set the name of the device. For example, we are going to call it Test Device. In the Device menu, we can select a template for the device. We don't really need any specific device template right now, so we can select the first one. In the Target menu, we can choose which SDK to use. Depending on the packages installed in the SDK Manager, we have different options. In this case, Android 4.1.2 API Level 16 is good for our tests. In the CPU ABI menu, we choose the processor for the device. Since we have installed the Intel Hardware Accelerator, let's select the Intel Atom element. This permits us to run the device in fast mode. Let's continue configuring the other features of this device. We don't need any camera on the device, so we can leave these two options as they are. Here at the bottom of the window is a message that warns us about the RAM amount selected. Let's set the RAM to 768 so that the warning disappears, and then let's also change the amount of the internal storage and the SD card. Now that the configuration of the device is complete, we can click OK to confirm the settings and create the device. As we can see, once the device is created, it is listed in the pane. Now when we want to run it, we can just select it in the list and then click the button Start. Before running, we can choose to configure the screen dimension of the virtual interface. Let's check the box Scale Display and set the screen size to 6. This avoids allowing the device screen to take the whole display. Let's click Launch to start the device and wait until it loads. In this window, we can see some of the logs about the launching process. Even if we have some warnings, we can see that the device is running in fast virtual mode. The device is loading, and a new window appears in the Start menu. This is the window where the emulated device will be displayed. This may require some time to load, but we can see that the operating system is loading. After a few seconds, we can see that it is ready. Now we can interact with the device using our mouse and keyboard. For example, we can open the menu, browse applications, widgets, and start applications. Let's try to run the browser application. As we can see, it is working fine and the home page is successfully loaded. Of course, we can interact with the device using our keyboard. For example, let's try to search eLearn Security and see if the connection works. Seems that everything is working fine, and now we have a fully functional virtual device. From the AVD Manager, we can create, run, and manage as many devices as we want. For now, this device is enough. So let's go back in Eclipse and see how we can create and run a simple application directly on the virtual device we just created. To create a new application project, let's click the arrow on the right of the new button and select Android Application Project. Here we can start configuring our new application. So let's enter the name of the application. For example, let's call it Hello World. As we can see, some of the other fields are automatically filled with some information such as the project name and the package name. If we select them, the bottom of the window displays some information about the field. For example, the project name is the name that must be set for Eclipse to identify the project. In the next drop-down field, we have to determine some configuration settings for the SDK. We can set the minimum required SDK, the target SDK, which SDK version the application must be compiled with, and at the end, a theme to use. Since the operating system of our virtual device is Android 4.1, let's select API 16 for both target and compile fields. Note that we can check the OS running on the device by opening Settings and then scrolling down until we find the option About Phone. And here we can see the Android version. As we already knew, it is Android 4.1.1. Let's go back into Eclipse and continue to create our application. Here we can set some configuration items about the Eclipse project. We can leave these options as they are and click Next. In this new window, we can set the icon of our application. Click Browse and select the new icon. On the right, we can see a preview of the icons that will be used. Let's continue with the next step. Here we choose whether to create an activity and what kind of activity it has to be. Since this app will be very simple, let's select Blank Activity and click Next. Now let's change the name of the activity to Hello World and click Finish to conclude the creation process. Once a clip has ended its operation, we can see the application project in the left pane, while in the central pane we have the source code of the activity Hello World. As we can see, there is a new tab opened. This file defines how the activity will look, and from this view we can add, delete, or edit objects on the activity. So this is nothing else but the graphical preview of our application. Right now we have only one text view object in this activity. If we want to add objects to the application, we can just select them on the left pane where they are well organized. Here, for example, we have different sections such as form widgets, text fields, layout of the activity, and so on. Let's add a text field to the activity. We can simply drag and drop it from the menu into the activity. Note that on the right side of the middle pane, we can set the properties for each object selected. We can also define and set several properties that goes from the object name to the size, the position, and other graphical details. Of course, depending on the item selected, the available properties change. Depending on the object selected, these fields change. So right now we have a label and a text input field. That's enough for now. We just want to see how to create and run applications on virtual devices, so we just needed a simple application that does nothing. So let's suppose that our app is complete and that we want to run it on the device. To do this, let's move in the Hello World.java tab and click the green play button in the top menu. Eclipse asks us how we would like to run the application. Let's select the first entry Android application and click OK. Let's save the changes and wait until the application is uploaded, installed, and launched on the device. We can see the process status in the right bottom corner of Eclipse. So let's go back on the virtual device and see what's happening. As we can see, after a few seconds, the application is running on the device. Since this is an input object, we can interact with it and write everything we want. Of course, there is no button or action related to the object of this view, so we can't do anything more than just this. If we go back in the application list, we can see that the app is now listed here. Here we see the icon we chose during the application creation process. This will work as any other application on the device. We can click on the icon to start it, put it in the background, or kill it. Even though it's a trivial app, it works fine on the emulated device. Before closing the device, let's go back into Eclipse where we can see that a window appeared. Here Eclipse asks if we want to monitor the application and the virtual device behavior through Logcat, which is the Android logging system that allows us to collect and view system debug output. If we click OK, we can see that a new view appears at the bottom. Here we can inspect logs collected from the applications and portions of the system that may be very useful during our analysis. On the left, we have some save filters. For example, every time we launch an application, a new filter for the specific app is created. We can filter the logs by writing regular expressions in this field. We can also select the display logs depending on some predefined templates. For example, we can choose to display only info logs, debugging logs, or error logs. By clicking on the plus symbol in the top right, we can also create new filters. In this video, we have seen how to install and configure the Android SDK on Windows machines. The SDK bundle contains all the tools needed to create and configure virtual devices. It also contains the whole programming environment with specific plugins that allow us to create and run applications in just a few steps. We would advise you to create several devices and test different Android versions. In addition, writing Android applications will come in handy since it will help you to better understand how they work and how to use the Android components. Also note that the samples contained in the SDK and the online training available on developers.android.com are very useful resources. Thanks for joining us.